So we have a bill actually here at the legislature that is dealing with AI chatbots, and we have we have some state legislators here in Oregon that want the AI chatbot to have to disclose that it is a chatbot and it isn't a person. And then in certain situations, if people are going through like health or mental struggles, the chatbot's supposed to refer them out. So that legislation here leads me to like the broader conversation of what I want to have you on to talk about today. And by the way, I'm here with Shane Tews from the American Enterprise Institute. She's a fellow, senior fellow over there. And because it sounds like, and I wasn't even necessarily aware of this, there's big federal legislation regarding AI, and a lot of that, and it's a really big conversation, bigger than AI even, maybe just all online privacy protections and stuff like that. So I thought you've done some writing on the subject, and you're an expert on this, and so my hope is to talk to you a little bit about that today. So thanks.
Absolutely, Reagan. Thank you for having me. There are different layers to this. We definitely have
Yeah.
artificial intelligence. Lots of not only the states, the feds all have some things going on there. This child online safety is a big issue, so that's one that I'm sure that we'll get into today. There are so I've been in technology for almost 3 decades. I've been
Okay.
doing. I mean, literally, I like used to explain to people on Capitol Hill in Washington how the internet works. I still do, actually. So I have I'm a good depth on it, even though I always say I didn't come to it natively. I'm not an engineer, but I spend a lot of time with engineers, and I am a policy analyst, policy dork. So there's kind of a right way and a wrong way to do this from a technical perspective. I always want
Okay.
the engineers in the room first and the lawyers second, if I get my choice. So that's the way I look at legislation is I don't want things to be overly prescriptive on the technology
Yep.
because it'll harden. And these, as you know, anybody, you're young enough to understand because you're used to updating stuff all the time, and that's sometimes a challenge to explain to the legislators is you can't. It's gonna be hard to get that out once it's in place. So let's look at the outcome. What is it we're trying to do? And then let's see how we work the legislative language into getting the outcome, but don't necessarily make it tech neutral. And if you're going to go tech specific, make sure that you're going very specific to what the challenge or the problem is. So the chatbots are interesting. I actually find like I'm happier when I'm dealing with a chatbot than a human most
Hmm.
of the time. It's going to give me
Yep.
better, faster, more efficient information. The challenge on child online safety that we've been watching is this idea of do you put it on the operating level? So the idea of it when you take it out of the box, I'm an Apple user, so when I take my
Yeah.
new mobile phone out, or do you do it at the app level? And the
Right.
reason in this particular case you want to do it at the app level is that's where all the action is, right? That's giving parents more control over the things the parents are concerned about. If you do it kind of at the door opening level, which is the when the operating level, you are giving the device itself, and maybe, depending on which, it could be Android or Apple, you're giving it more information to gather less information in theory. So you want all of this information on the child, which you should not be gathering. You
No.
want a kid's information out of the hands of anyone but the parent for as long as possible.
Yep. And I think also if you do it at the front end during setup, what you're concerned about is getting your device set up and working for whatever you want to use it for, not this important information or this important disclaimer, but not like that's not when you're focused on it. And so you're clicking accept all 10, 20 different times, and now this is time number 21.
So the one thing that Apple very specifically worked on to try to, see what the this has been going on for a couple of years. So it's like let's see what the people are upset about, and these age variables. So they created an actual system that has the ability to signal for the parent to signal an age range.
Yep.
That means you can go, under 12, which is kind of a legal barrier for a lot of places. But then for
Yeah.
a while, until recently, it was 12 to 17. Well, there's a lot of difference between a 12-year-old and a 17-year-old. So
Yeah.
they created the age signaling so you can signal to the app developer about which category the child's in without giving them the actual date of the child. Because what
Yes.
the app developer is going to do, or I mean, it's a commercial market, right? So the first thing they're going to do is create a profile on whoever the user of the app is. And in this case, if it's
Right.
a child, you're giving it more information. And then they're going to continue to gather data on that child. So the idea of doing signaling at the operating level is really the key. And then if you are downloading one, especially one of the social media accounts, that's where you want the information to flow because then they know they may not know the content the minute it's driven, but they'll know it once it's on their platform, where it needs to go, and they can put gating mechanisms in there. I actually wrote a piece. I wrote a piece and then I updated it over Christmas that was on parental guidance because I heard this a lot from staff who'd say, the app should do this or the thing should do that, and I'm like, it does. Have you actually tried doing it? And they're like, No." So I said, okay, well, so I spent 2 Christmases ago, sat down and I wrote a 35-page paper at every level you could think of on anything that your kid could touch. And then I
Yeah.
updated it last year because there were some major changes in what Apple was putting forward and some changes in Android. But I did it even to the cable box level. So, think there's a particular show that's on right now, which is very popular. And maybe some things you wouldn't want everybody to see, but consenting adults, fine. I go to my Samsung television and then I
Hmm.
go to my Comcast, which goes to my Compact's box, and I use the voice thing, and then I ask it for a show, and then it took me to Paramount Plus. I had three chances there if I were a parent to gate, right? The Samsung TV has gating, the Comcast box has gating, and then I could do it on my, Paramount Plus. But it's not up to Samsung, the television maker, to know what is going on at Paramount Plus. So that's a
Right.
way to think about that without thinking about it as the mobile device, because we get really hung up on, the Instagram, Facebooks of the world, and there are other things out there. And I am a big user of both those products, but I think that there's definitely for the challenges that parents are dealing with now, with the idea of having that always on device process, they need to stay engaged. They need to be thinking about what they're putting in their kids' hands, whatever device it is, and making sure that they have the measures to put on the kids, as well as the ability. Like some of the tool sets will ping the parent's phone, they'll do a tethering, and they'll
Yep.
say, "Hey, your kid's at requesting to look at this," and then they can make a judgment call and say yes or no to that, because that gives the parent, there might be a case where they're like, I see an educational reason for this, or they'll be like, no, I don't want that in my kid's hands.
I have kids. I have three of them. I've got an 8-year-old, I've got a
Congratulations.
4-year-old, and a 1-year-old. Thank you. And the 1-year-old doesn't yet. We're trying to keep his screen time at zero or as close to zero as humanly possible. But the 4 and the 7-year-old both use screens and they have an iPad, one iPad that they share. And we set up the parental guide, or I set up the parental guidance on it, and I set it up to do just that. If you try to download an app, it pings my phone. The browser is blocked. All these things. And now, as they age up, they're going to slowly break into more opportunities on those devices with limits always, right? And the key is, I think, and my guess is that you're dealing with maybe a lot of Hill staffers who do not have children, and that might be the main reason they don't have any experience with this. You wouldn't have any
Right.
reason to set it up if you don't have kids, but if you do, you know how powerful and how good it is, and how, especially Apple, because I think their brand is privacy, their brand is family, and so they care a lot about the perception of how their platform works with kids. They've been through all kinds of lawsuits about in-app purchases, for instance. That's purchasing and all that stuff you can restrict at the platform level, with that. So you have all those things that Apple has that I think work very well. But then you sort of have this idea that I guess is out there now and is a part of some of this legislation, or people are trying to make it a part of this legislation, where Apple is supposed to be responsible for, at the App Store level, of knowing. And so I'm because I wanted to read this. You have some writing that argues current legislative proposals are misplacing the responsibility, shifting the age verification and parental consent from individual apps to the operating system or app stores. Now, if Apple wants to provide it, that's fine. But why shouldn't we force them to do it? I guess is my question.
Yeah, you want to avoid the temptation to solve the problem at what seems to be the easiest point, which is that entry door point,
Yeah.
right? The operating system. So that there's temptation to say, well, this is a really complex problem. There's a bunch of apps. So we'll just do it at the entry level. And that doesn't resolve your problem, because it goes back to what I mentioned earlier. You're collecting way too much information at the operating level. It doesn't need that. To not have any responsibility on the actual developer of the app, that is where the content lies. So they're going to have a much better sense. They're the ones designing that experience. What is it that could be a problematic issue, and how do I build that into the guidance when I do the parental, parts of my application? And we'll use the Meta properties as an example. Instagram has that. They have a very robust, as does I'll say Facebook, but no child's using Facebook.
No.
But Instagram and then the other things around Meta, they have a very robust set of parental guidance. I feel for them because I've been through them all with them, and the challenge is, it for maybe some parents that feels like, why did I have to do it twice? Well, that's because there are multiple apps, and you need to be able to understand what the experience is. You may not want your kid to be on that particular app, or you're like, I'm fine with it as long as they're getting gated from some of the things. And all those criteria are in there for apps like that. There's other apps. I'm not a TikTok user, so I can't speak to TikTok, but I know that they've got some, very robust parental guidance as well as others. And then there's certain ones that shouldn't be caught in the net. Restaurants, for example.
Yeah.
So when you when you do this at the operating level, you end up doing a lot of things that challenge retail apps that don't need to be that sophisticated. They don't need that information. They don't need to know what age your kid is. If you are in a retail store purchasing something, don't give them more information than they need.
No, I think that's right. And I think you also, like you said, my perspective as a Republican is that if you have to do government and you have to have a government intervention, you have to have policy and rules and administrative rules. Those things should be as flexible as possible and not cause a lot of issues. And so when you're going to get super prescriptive about this, and also they're kind of already asking Apple to do something that they already do. They already rate apps in their app store. They already go through them for different approvals. They already don't allow apps that allow free access to the internet to go to your 4 plus category, your 12 plus category. That's all rated 17 plus anyway.
Mhm.
And so it doesn't make sense to me why you'd mandate it and why you'd use Apple as the example of why you need to mandate it when they're doing it of their own volition. That is the weird thing to me about this whole thing.
No, I feel like they're a company that is exceptionally responsible for understanding the opportunities and challenges that a digital economy and environment puts forward to you. So that's why they're so privacy forward. The do not track, if you get that every time you download something, it says ask this app to track something, and you have the
Yep.
option. You can say, sure, I don't care. Or you can be like, yeah, maybe that app doesn't need to know my geolocation. There's no need for that, other than they're probably reselling that through a third party,
Right.
usually, if they're not using a direct user of it. So they are exceptionally responsible. They've put a lot of work, policy paperwork out on this, as well as I've worked with their team. I've worked with the Google team as well, and then I've heard from Roblox. I pretty much talk to anybody who has this as a challenge, just to get a sense
Hmm.
of what their opportunities and challenges are. And I'll say, because there's a lot of risk there, their legal teams are always really on top of this. So
Yes.
I'm sure that you guys have got a lot going on with the very tail end of your session, but these people are always there and available if there's questions, but don't go for the easy door. The easy door is not solving the problem.
So tell me about, because I think one of the bills, I don't know how, I know about Schoolhouse Rock and how a bill becomes a law.
That's
Congress's
accurate. That's
process
actually very
is
accurate.
very different from our state legislative process. We do have a committee heavy process, but we go bill by bill. It sounds like they can take a pile of bills of one
Yes, they can.
category and mark them all up together. So the Parents Over Platforms Act seems to be the one that you have focused on, although I'm sure you have knowledge of all these other bills, and maybe you can share what makes Parents Over Platforms different and what makes it maybe superior, or why folks would want to ask their congresspeople to move forward with that particular piece.
So first of all, I want to congratulate you. You're absolutely right. That's exactly what they tried to do at the end of December. They put a bunch of bills together that completely conflicted with each other and moved them forward, which
Okay.
doesn't make a lot of sense. They didn't do their homework. Parents Over Platform Act actually recognizes the need for that precision on age gating that we were just talking about. So it gives the parents more control of where the risk exists, which is on that actual app that has the content. And so it's getting away from the idea of pushing the easy button, just throwing everything on the operating system and then not caring after that point. You have to care at that application level and have the developer take some responsibility for what they're putting and allowing on that application, that app.
Okay. And I think that makes, I mean, again, I'm a super technology person, been an
And you
Apple
put this
user
up for two kids and a third on the way that's going
for
to understand all this stuff. So
that's
you've
right.
got reality on your favor there.
Yes, and I think that is the thing that makes me most understanding of why you need flexibility, because technology is always changing. We have a model right now that's based on OSs and apps, but there's lots of attempts to disrupt that model of literally just using a computer. I mean, you have all kinds of devices that are not laptops that have apps, or iPads that have apps, or phones that have apps. You've got glasses, and you've got other wearables, and a lot of them are generally adopting the app model because it's an understood model. But as once there's a severe disruption to that, and even right now, the chatbots and the AI, mostly apps, although there is some OS level integration of like Siri or something else, right? But the goal, I think, long term is to make the apps sort of dissolve and disappear into the background. Maybe they exist or they plug into something, but you just have one interface to deal with something that might be voice or might be visual. And so, again, situation that you're talking about where you just get super prescriptive about technology and saying, well, this is how this app and this OS and this everything has to work. 20 years ago, they were called programs, not apps. So that's the
Right.
other thing where it's just like technology is evolving. And in the United States, I think we've generally been really good at allowing technology to evolve with minimal sideboards. And you put too many regulations in there, and you'll stifle the innovation. Two, you'll actually make it harder to implement the kind of protections that you really do want as technology evolves.
Yeah, now that almost everything has a screen, I've been saying this and nobody ever has adopted it. I'd really like them to have emojis. So I look at the four things when I'm downloading an app, and it's sort of like the thing with the monkey that's covering its ears, or so I know like it's what are my four key things I'm worried about? Is it going to have access to like any sort of financial thing? Is there a pay element to it?
Yep.
Privacy issue, age issue, maybe one more thing. But if I see those really quickly, I can make a quicker decision. I think we've challenged ourselves with the terms of service terms of use that people just it become a click-through menu that they just don't think about it. They click on it and then they wonder, that's what I think they are also equating sometimes with legislation. It's like, I'm just going to be able to toggle some boxes and be done with it. And that just is not the case, especially when it comes to kids.
Well, and that's, I think, Apple, when you set up a new device, yes, you have the general terms of service, and that screen was clearly designed by a lawyer, not anybody who makes technology. Nobody who likes technology or wants technology to work likes the screen and how it's set up. And we all just scroll to the bottom and hit accept all terms, and we don't even like we don't nobody reads it. At least I don't. I don't know anybody who reads it. And then you have a lot of introductory questions that Apple asks you about how you want to use your device. And those screens are very well designed. I think they continue to update them. They continue to make them better to set up your device so you understand what kind of access it has to your location, what kind of access it has to, any credit cards or whatever that you may have in your accounts, all those kinds of things. And that's what we need for the child privacy and the online safety stuff is we need that, but we need to have options. We need to have options at the app level. We need to allow Apple to implement whatever they want to implement, allow Google to implement whatever they want to implement, right? And then also allow the AI companies to be involved in that as well for their product, which I think is becoming very prevalent. There's a lot of controversy about AI and chatbots being used in schools right now. In Oregon, actually, there was a school district in Central Oregon that had a chatbot that was the parents didn't like the icon that they used for the chatbot because of how the particular chatbot child was depicted. It looked like a person, and they were like, "It's not a person." And so there's just a lot of controversy about that stuff right now. And the tendency is always to tamp it down by saying we fixed it, by saying we put all of these sideboards in place. And the longer the list of sideboards, the safer everybody is. And I think what you've been very helpful in sharing with us today is like just because you added more sideboards, more limits, more requirements does not make us safer online.
Correct. You want to put those caution flags where they belong. And so if you put them in the very entry level and then you don't seem like you look like you're talking about taking that thing out of the box to give your kids, you did all that stuff for the Apple setup. If you don't ever have to touch it again and you're thinking, oh, Apple's operating system is going to take care of that for the apps, that means you're not having the capability as a parent to have the control over that app situation and experience. But you want there's certain things that you're going to be like YouTube, for example. YouTube, there almost everything that you just talked about, you could probably YouTube and get an answer for it, which I love them for. But there's also parts of YouTube that maybe are not things that you want your kid to have access to. They have great controls for that. So everybody who knows this is a possible risk or technical challenge for them usually have those on their settings. And it's just a matter of a couple clicks to do it. I know it sounds complicated, but we're almost all digital natives now. So take a couple minutes, protect your kids, and don't expect it to be like just on the front door and nowhere else. That just isn't going to work.
I agree. So, and I apologize because I didn't give you prep for this question, but do we know what the next step is, how it's looking in terms of markup, and do we think this is likely to finish moving forward in this Congress?
There is a chance of the House Energy and Commerce Committee moving one or several of the bills, depending on what they decide to go with, this week. And then that will move out
Okay.
of committee. And this is where your bill becomes a law, is true. It'll
Yeah.
go out of committee. Now, whether or not they make those conflicting things in one bill might still happen. And then it will go from there into eventually to the House floor. And then it has to be voted on the Senate side as well. So there's currently not a direct companion bill on the Senate side. I have talked to a couple Senate offices, and so there's an interest in doing something similar to what you mentioned, the Parents Over Platforms Act, which is the one I think is preferable uh, in the Senate. So there probably will be an introduction in March or not this spring, and then generally, if something doesn't happen by July around here in an election year, it doesn't happen.
That makes sense to me. We have a short session here that happens in even number. So we have a long legislative session that happens obviously in the odd numbered years when
Mhm.
there's at least a shot at governing. And then the even numbered years we have a 35-day session, and that becomes very tumultuous because there's all kinds of politics in there because it happens right before the filing deadline for candidates here, and then we have a very early primary compared to some states. We have a May primary, so it tends to get pretty political. So that makes sense to me that you're kind of go or no go by the 4th of July or thereabouts. Are there any key folks in Congress that are either that are leading the charge that people need to be aware of, or potential folks that need to be talked to weigh in? I mean, obviously, contact your own congressperson, your own U.S. senator, but who are like the key players that are involved in this?
I'll say there's so many pieces of legislation out there right now. I think it's just really important that people pay attention to where the activity needs to take place, which is at the app level, and talk to their congressperson about, the importance of protecting kids, but at the right place where parents can have some control. So I can't give you a list of names because I'm not sure right now what's in play, but
No worries.
I think that that's kind of the key thing to do is take a real interest as a parent on protecting your kids and making sure it's done in a way that you really have control.
Is there a place that people can go to read more and get kind of the information that they need to share with their
I have
congressperson that we can add to our show notes?
Sure, absolutely. I've written quite a bit about this over the last couple of years. So it's Shane
Awesome.
Tews, EWS at the American Enterprise Institute, which is aei.org, and just write in Shane Tews and kids, and about a dozen pieces will come up. And my colleagues who are more concerned about things around freedom of expression and First
Mm.
Amendment rights on some of the things more towards your AI questions, there's a lot of writing on that as well. My colleague Clay Calvert has written quite a bit. So I think you'll learn quite a bit from there. And then my colleagues at R Street have done quite a bit. There's a lovely woman named Shoshana. We call her Senator Shoshana. She's not actually a senator, but she deserves that title. She's also very busy and active on Twitter or X. So you'll see things. I would highly recommend those as well. And Cato. Cato does a lot of work in this space.
Awesome. Well, I'll compile some of that stuff for our listeners. I really appreciate your time today, Shane. I think that online privacy and technology is an interest of mine, obviously, both be out of necessity with my kids, but also just I like technology. So I really appreciate you coming on today to talk about
Absolutely.
it.
Thanks, Reagan. It was great to meet you.
Thank you.
Talk soon. Bye bye.